You know, we live in this world that's all about productivity, right? It's all life hacks and hustling and getting ahead. And in that kind of world, picking up a novel can feel, well, a little impractical. Like it's a luxury, an escape, but not really something useful. I'm sure you've heard that before.
And this quote, wow, it just sums it all up perfectly, doesn't it? This is the core argument we're up against. The idea that the only things worth our time are things we can immediately apply. But what if that whole way of thinking is, well, just missing the point entirely? What if the most practical, most useful knowledge isn't in a how-to guide, but hidden inside a story?
That's the big question we're going to tackle. Because there's a really compelling argument to be made that fiction isn't an escape from reality at all. It's actually a much, much deeper way of engaging with reality.
So, where do we start? Let's begin with what seems like the absolute least practical form of writing out there, poetry. I mean, seriously, how could a poem possibly have any useful information for us?
Now, what's so incredible about this quote is who wrote it. William Carlos Williams wasn't some academic locked in an ivory tower. He was a full-time doctor, a physician. He would literally scribble poems on his prescription pads in between seeing patients. So this is a guy who understood hard science, who understood the facts of life and death. And he's telling us that what's inside a poem is so essential, people are literally dying without it.
So, what is this news that poems carry? Well, it's not the kind of news you get from a newspaper, the facts, the data, the external events. No, Williams is talking about the news of our inner world. Think of it like this. Nonfiction can tell you what happened. But poetry, and all great literature, tells you what it felt like to be there. It delivers the capital T truths about our emotions and how we see the world. Okay, so we get it. Fiction carries this deep internal news. But how does it actually deliver that message so effectively? It turns out there's a really powerful psychological thing that happens to our brains when we really get lost in a good book. And here it is. It's a concept from a couple of researchers, Jeff Kaufman and Lisa Libby, called experience taking. And it's this almost magical process where for a little while, our own sense of self just kind of merges with a character in a story. We're not just watching them from the outside. For a moment, we become them. Their thoughts actually feel like our thoughts. Their feelings become our feeling. And this slide just nails the difference. We talk a lot about empathy, right? And empathy is great. It's understanding or feeling for somebody else. But experience taking is way more radical than that. It's about mentally becoming that other person. You're not just seeing the world through their eyes, you are adopting their entire mindset. What fiction gives us then is the incredible chance to literally live hundreds of different lives. And what's so cool is that the research gives us a sort of cheat sheet for how to make this effect even stronger. It works best when we're reading a story told in the first person, when the narrator says I. It's also more powerful when we start out by identifying with the character, when we see a bit of ourselves in them. But here's the really interesting twist. It's especially powerful when we discover the character's differences later on. It's like the story tricks us. It draws us in with what's familiar, and that makes us way more open to exploring what's different. And get this, even something as simple as not reading near a mirror, which reduces your own self-awareness, can actually boost experience taking. You're letting your own ego fade so someone else's can step in. Now, this ability to try on other lives doesn't just stay trapped inside the pages of the book. It actually gives us the tools we need to understand the single most important story we'll ever encounter, our own.
So there's this theory called narrative identity, and it's the idea that all of us make sense of our lives by turning our experiences into a personal story. It's not just a random list of memories. It's a constantly evolving narrative, with heroes and villains, plots and themes that ultimately defines who we think we are. We are, all of us, the authors of our own life story.
So here's the kicker. When we read fiction, we're not just being entertained. We are absorbing a massive library of narrative structures. We start to recognize these big themes, like redemption, where something terrible happens but it leads to growth, or agency, that feeling that you're in the driver's seat of your own life. These literary themes become the actual language we use to understand and even to shape the events that happen to us.
I know, this might still sound a little abstract, a little bit theoretical. But what happens when that news from a poem slams right into a real-world, high-stakes, life-or-death moment?
This classic line from Sherlock Holmes just gets right to the heart of it. In our crazy, busy lives, we see things all the time. We glance, we scan, we process information.
but to truly observe, to notice the deeper meaning, the subtle human cues in a moment. That's a skill, and it's a skill that reading fiction sharpens like nothing else.
Take a look at these lines from a Robert Frost poem. When the speaker's friend calls out, he doesn't just yell back from his field. No, he stops his work, he literally plants his tool in the ground, and he makes the conscious effort to plod all the way over for a connection. He's choosing the friendly visit over all the work he still has to do.
Okay, so let's put this into practice. Picture this scenario, which was actually described by a doctor. You're at your desk, you're swamped, deadlines are screaming at you, and a colleague walks past your office, but they slow down in a way that's just a little bit different. A meaningful walk.
So what do? Do you see it, but keep your head down, keep working on all those hills you haven't hoed yet? Or do you observe it? Do you remember that wisdom from Robert Frost's poem and choose to go up to that stone wall for a friendly visit?
Because that colleague might be contemplating suicide, and that friendly visit, that one simple choice to connect, could be the single most productive thing you do all day, all week, all year. That right there, that is the news from a poem. That is the practical, life-saving power of learning how to observe.
So, we've seen how fiction can literally change our perspective, how it gives us the tools to understand ourselves, and even guides us in these critical moments. But what does the hard science say about its long-term effects on who we are as people?
All right, let's ground this in some actual data. A study from 2017 dug into this exact question. They looked at high school students to see how reading literature actually affected different parts of their personality.
And the results were really interesting. Reading literature didn't magically turn these students into perfectly enlightened, self-actualized people, but it did have one very clear, statistically significant effect. It improved their social relations. By living all these different lives through stories, they got measurably better at navigating the complexities and relationships in their own lives.
And this is why. It's because literature does something data just can't. A textbook might say, winter is cold, so humans make fire to stay warm. But look at how Thomas Hardy describes it. He says lighting a fire is a spontaneous Promethean rebelliousness, a godlike act of defiance against the cold and the darkness. It doesn't just give you the facts, it captures the very soul of the act.
So let's go back to that first question. Is reading fiction a waste of time? Well, nonfiction can teach us how to build a better mousetrap. But fiction, and all great art, is what reminds us why it's worth building a better world in the first place. It teaches us about legacy, about connection, about finding a meaning that's bigger than just our own lives. And in a world obsessed with productivity, maybe learning empathy, beauty, and what it truly means to be human is the most practical skill of all.